The Razorback basketball team gets a big pickup and a commitment over the weekend, as well as a few Razorback football players that have committed to play for the University of Arkansas. We'll talk about that in the baseball season as well. This is the Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Out of Bounds. You can catch every weekday afternoon from 1 to 4 on 103.7 The Buzz and 103.7thebuzz.com. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Head over to betonline.net where the game starts. And I hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. I wanted to throw that in there because for those of you who are listening to the podcast or for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you'll see that I'm back in my own domain. I'm back in my home here in Little Rock. It's good to be back. It's good to be hopefully getting back into the routine of things once again. But either way, it was a fun journey, and I know we're going to talk about that and recap it. As much as it's painful to do, we will dive into that and talk about it at length as well. But, I thought about doing a whole baseball podcast, but honestly, I think at this point in time, people are kind of just, wanting to move on. And it has nothing to do with like anything negative against the baseball team. It's more just kind of like, hey, it ended. We know it ended. It's a great run, but let's start thinking about good vibes and positive vibes only. So we'll do that. But again, I will save probably for the last segment, maybe the second segment, just to kind of break all that down and talk about that as well. But, there was some good news, though, that happened for Razorback sports over the weekend. And I want to start with the basketball side of things because that was kind of the big news, or at least the big commitment for Razorback basketball. And they got a big commitment as part of the 2023 class in Layden Blocker. Blocker sounds like a basketball player. I mean, he was just, he was born to do that. But he is a point guard. He's 6'2". He's 175 pounds, and he's out of Maumelle, Arkansas. He goes to Sunrise Christian High School. Depending on who you look at, and who you're ranking it out at, 247 Sports has him as the number one player in the state of Arkansas. Have him as the number 5 point guard in the country and the number 34 player overall. He had offers to Auburn, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Alabama, but chose to stay home at Arkansas. And just to kind of give a little bit of a breakdown of the type of player he is, he's an athletic guard, dynamic on the open floor. He has a lot of top-end speed. He's really capable of creating tempo. And he also has the ability to accelerate mid-drive, attack both sides. So apparently it's his athleticism and his speed that really makes him an effective point guard, especially getting towards the rim. He's a good passer in transition. He has a 3.8 to 1 assist turnover ratio where he was as a junior. Now, the thing is, he's not a natural outside shooter, but he's very selective in his shots, and he makes good decisions when it comes to how he approaches the offensive game as well. So overall, it just seems like a really good player for Arkansas and a really good pickup for Eric Musselman and the Razorback basketball team, which we know how elite that these, this past recruiting class was for Arkansas, and has a bunch of 5 stars, and Layden Blocker, as of right now, is the only commitment that they have for the 2023 class, which is always going to be just fascinating to me because I'm going to be curious. All right, so what are they going to do when it comes to other players that, are they going to go after 5 stars, or maybe are they going to go more so after the transfers? How many players are going to be even available for scholarship on the next year? Like, there's a lot of things that they got to work out and they got to figure out. But overall, this is a huge get for Arkansas with Layden Blocker because of just, again, the where he ranks and, the need for a point guard, especially because, let's be honest, Nick Smith is probably going to play a lot of point guard. I know Anthony Black's probably going to play too. Both those guys may be gone at that guard position after 1 year. So you got to find somebody else. You got to be able to add some other guys into the mix. So big pickup for them. And I think it just continues to show a couple of things. First off, you got a prospect that people are high on here in the state of Arkansas, and you're able to keep them home. That's something that I think that Arkansas maybe struggled at times with in previous years of being able to get the high-end kids to stay home at Arkansas when there's no excuse for them to leave. Not saying every kid has to come to Arkansas in order for it to be success, but there were kids that absolutely considered Arkansas, but because of other things going on, they decided to move on and to go elsewhere. And that just was not a very good recipe for anybody involved. So Eric Musselman's done an outstanding job of getting all the kids in Arkansas to come to Arkansas. I know Khalil Ware was the 5-star that went to Oregon. Hey, that is what it is, but you still got 3 5-stars instead. So I think that people will probably take that trade-off on that front. But overall, it just shows once again that Eric Musselman, who's been known to really do a good job in the transfer portal, he's doing a phenomenal job of in the high school recruiting and really, really getting after it. I mean, you get the number 34 player overall, the number 5 point guard, number 1 player in the state of Arkansas. Everyone's signing up for that. And then on top of that, you think about just once again the amount of in-state talent that is produced here in Arkansas. Arkansas, let's be honest, Arkansas is not a big-time state when it comes to football recruiting. There'll be some years where they have more so than other years. There'll be years where they have that high-end player, that Darren McFadden caliber guy, or the Michael Dyers, or the Darius Winstons, that 5-star player. So Seguin, they'll have those every so often. But basketball is truly where this state is incredible at. Like they produce high-end college players and even great NBA players or NBA prospects at a very high clip. And we know that the NBA draft happened last week, which we hadn't had a chance to talk about. That's why I'm kind of incorporating this with that, where Jaylin Williams gets drafted in the 2nd round to the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is that's an awesome thing. He obviously made the right decision moving on to the NBA. There's no doubt about that. He's going to be in Oklahoma City, which is just a few hours away from his hometown in Fort Smith. And that's just awesome. But you started thinking about what on top of what Jaylin Williams has done in his draft. He gets drafted. He's from Fort Smith, Arkansas. Previous year, you had Moses Moody drafted, who was from Arkansas. Previous year before that, you had Isaiah Joe, another player from Arkansas drafted out of Fort Smith. The previous year before that, you had Daniel Gafford, a player drafted out of El Dorado. Didn't have anyone drafted the year before that, but then the year before that, you had Bobby Portis, another player that was drafted out of the state of Arkansas to Central Arkansas. And then next year, I think we all can go ahead and put our money down in saying that Nick Smith, another native Arkansan, is going to be drafted. And who knows, maybe he gets drafted like really high, like top 5. We'll see. But he's going to be a draftable player. And then after that, we don't really know the future for seeing it. But the point is if you add that up, I'm doing the math correctly, which could be bad. You're talking about 6 out of 7 years where you have a kid from Arkansas, from the state of Arkansas, not just went to Arkansas, but from the state of Arkansas, getting drafted into the NBA. That's incredible. Like, that's absolutely incredible. And again, it goes to show just how much talent is here and why, as long as you have the right coach in place, as long as you have someone like Eric Musselman at the head of the whole thing, that as long as he's coach, it's going to entice these high talented players to come inside the state to Fayetteville and be able to build a basketball program that can compete for national championships, because there's that much talent. Now, obviously, you're going to need help from other places too. Like you think about Anthony Black, getting him from Texas, or Jordan Walsh, and getting him from I guess technically he was out of Missouri, but out of state. Think about Barry Dunning, and a guy that not people not talk about, but he was Mr. Basketball in Alabama. You think about Justin Smith and what he added. You think about J.D. Note and what he added when he came to Arkansas. You think about, guys like even Devo Davis has been a fine college player and what he's done from the state, but still, it's just a place where people want to be and they want to be a part of it. And, it just keeps mass producing these highly talented players. So as long as this keeps happening, as long as Muss does a phenomenal job of recruiting inside the state, which I don't see any reason why he won't continue to do that, there's no reason to believe that Arkansas here, maybe even this year, as soon as this year, or here in the next few years, could have a number 1 overall seed. And the reason I say it's tough to do that, because obviously back-to-back Elite Eights has been great, but it's really hard for me to just say, oh, this is why they'll have a national championship, because it's the NCAA tournament. Who knows what the crap is going to happen? Let's be honest. But it just shows that if you have that great regular season, you end up being that number 1 overall seed. I think that that's a lot more attainable, easier to get to, because I think Arkansas will have that maybe this year. It could happen. But continuing to produce the talent from the state, recruit that talent, add some other pieces here, and hit the transfer portal and getting some big-time players, which Arkansas has also done this year. Like, all these factors coming into play is what's going to make Arkansas become a perennial powerhouse in college basketball once again. And that was a big pickup for them that already starting for the next year out of the state of Arkansas with Layden Blocker. It's a huge get for them already. And they're going to be building it. And that's what great programs do. They don't go all in on one year. They build it. They lay the foundation. And I think as long as Arkansas continues to do what they're doing, you're going to see that continuing to build and that continuing to get to the mix as well. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting sports needs and info for all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spots for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. So head to BetOnline.net and get the fastest and easiest way to check on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf, by heading to the website today or using your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions over at BetOnline.net, where the game starts.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so I said I was going to do it for the final segment, but I'm going to do it here because I want to end on a better note than what I'm going to be discussing here. But so you probably already know, Razorback Baseball, their season came to an end last week, and they lost to Ole Miss in that final elimination game 2-0 on Thursday, and it was kind of a downer, kind of a bummer. You were one of the final 3 teams in the country, though. You won 3 games in the College World Series. You went 3-2. So I am not going to say that this year was a failure or a disappointment, because it wasn't. And anybody that says anything different, you are an idiot. If you think that this year was some sort of disappointment, you're an idiot. Sorry. Maybe that's harsh, but it's true. Now, can you say that you're bummed that you didn't win a championship because you felt like you were good enough to? Of course you can say that. But to have like a bad feeling or a bad and eerie look upon this past season down the road and say, that was the year where, man, we just didn't get it done, and that was a really bad thing. I'm not down for that. I don't get down for that, and I don't get down with that. But that being said, I'm going to try to not vomit when I say this. Ole Miss winning it, and they win the national championship officially yesterday. They beat Oklahoma, and they won the College World Series title. And now in back-to-back years, Mississippi State and Ole Miss have won a national title. That hurts. That hurts. Like that, I'm just going to be real about it. That hurts, because you have been a better baseball program for the past 20 years overall than Ole Miss for sure. And even Mississippi State, they've had some really good success, but you've at least been on par with them as far as the World Series appearances and everything. And now both of those Mississippi schools in back-to-back years win the College World Series. And in the years that they did win it, last year, where you were the number 1 overall seed, Mississippi State won instead. And this year, where they beat you, and Ole Miss was the last team in to the postseason. I still don't think they even deserve to get in, but apparently they deserve to win it all. That makes it exponentially hurt worse. And I get that. I totally understand that. And I totally understand why Razorback fans kind of feel that sick feeling. In fact, I'll be honest. I had to like mute some words on Twitter, because I was just like, I can't deal with this. It just sucks. It sucks that it had to be them, and it sucks that it's not you. But here's my thing and my take on all of it. It was a great year. Again, I fully agree. Next year, you're going to be replacing pretty much everybody. Totally get it. Totally understand it. And that's just kind of the way that it's going to be. And that's the way that baseball is sometimes. And who's to say that Arkansas won't be a really good team again next year? Possibly a College World Series team again next year. It could happen. It could absolutely happen. You're going to have some really good pitching back. We'll see what some players decide as far as moving on with their draft eligibility. You have to replace the entire infield besides Peyton Stovall, essentially. But pitching is there. If you get some guys in the portal, if some guys step up and develop, Who knows? He could be a really good team again next year. So, I don't think that that's even the case. But my whole thing is that I believe in hope. I have hope. I have hope that it is going to happen for Arkansas one day. And as much as it pained me to see Ole Miss win it last night, I guess, yesterday afternoon, that kind of made me say, you know what? That was a program that had only been one College World Series like this millennium, and constantly got crapped upon and made fun of because it was that Omaha stood for Ole Miss at home again. And I'll give credit also to Mike Bianco, where there was a couple years there where they were the most obnoxious players, like Tennessee level obnoxious TikTok videos, stupid stuff like that made it so much easier to hate them. And they never really did anything with that until this year, where it seems like they finally slowed it down and stopped, and then they ended up winning it. So I do want to give them credit for at least stopping with the nonsense, as much as it pains me. But I see Ole Miss and I see how they won it, and I see that it's a team that got in at the last minute, team that and a program that's been pretty much like a poverty program. In all things considered, they were about to fire Mike Bianco, and then they turned it on and got it done. That gives me hope that it can happen. It's unfortunate it hasn't. It is. But to get to the College World Series is so difficult. We all know that. And to win the College World Series is so difficult. We know that too. Arkansas in 2018, part of me feels like that was their chance. That was the time they could do it, and they didn't. But also part of me believes that when things go a certain way and can happen in a certain time frame, all bets are off. I look at Arkansas this year. They were a team that didn't even host because they were so poor down the stretch in the regular season. And if I would have told you once postseason started that Arkansas was going to be one of the final three teams remaining in the College World Series, most of you probably would have laughed at me and said, okay, I'm subscribing to your podcast, and I'm going to go and I'm going to kick you in the shin as soon as I see you. Some of you may have done that. But that's the truth. That's the reality. That's what happened, is that this team actually was able to do some big things and do some, incredible acts of getting to the point to where they were one of the final three teams in the College World Series and in college baseball. So my whole point is that I still believe it can happen. I still believe that Dave Van Horn is one of the elite coaches, although there is some things that are going on. Like I saw Wes Johnson is going to LSU, and he's getting paid $750,000 a year. May jump off a bridge because I really liked Wes Johnson. Matt Hobbs is a great coach too, so I'm not saying he's not, but geez, between that and LSU adding all these transfers, like the kid from NC State, that Tommy kid, it's just like, golly, this is tough. It's tough, but baseball's crazy. Who knows what's going to happen? Tennessee may have been one of the best teams that ever be assembled, and they fell short. They didn't even get to the College World Series. So crazy things can happen. It's unfortunate, but again, I want to reiterate, this was a great year. It's a great year. It was not disappointing. It's not a failure. He said you could be bummed that it didn't go the way that you wanted to go once you got to the College World Series, especially on that last day where, man, if you just got anything going offensively, like you would have beaten Oklahoma. Arkansas would have smoked Oklahoma just as much as Ole Miss did. So that's what hurts too, is knowing that, man, just that. If he just would have had a few hits, it's amazing how things would have been different, but that's the way baseball goes sometimes. We'll wrap up shop and close it out here on the other side of the break here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, final segment here of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, just kind of a few quick hitters. Not really much to go into detail too much about at this point in time, but Razorback Football did get a few commitments over the weekend as well, where you got commitments from a linebacker, Alex Sanford, and defensive lineman Steven Johnson. Alex Sanford, 6'3", 240 pounds, out of Mississippi. He's actually out of Oxford, so he went into the backyard of Ole Miss, and he had offers from Ole Miss, Tennessee, Memphis, and a few others. So definitely a team that are a big pickup, because anytime you can go into the backyard of some other SEC West team, especially one like Ole Miss, and get him to come to your school, that's pretty nice, especially when Ole Miss was interested in him. So adding a little bit of linebacker depth there as well. And then if you're looking at Sanford, like I said, he had 131 tackles, 25 and a half tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, 2 recovered fumbles, and 2 blocked punts. And that was just as a junior. So he also led Oxford to the Class 6A North state title as a sophomore in his semifinal years. And then you got the other guy, of course, Steven Johnson. He's 6'5", 320 pounds out of Fayetteville, Georgia, Whitewater. So he chose Razorbacks over scholarship offers from Maryland, Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt, and a few others. So both of them are kind of 3-star players. He was one of 8 uncommitted prospects visiting this weekend with 3 commitments and defensive lineman Quincy Rhodes, linebacker Carson Dean, and defensive lineman Caleb James. So, so nice pickups there for Razorback football. And I know that that's the next big thing. I know we're going to have SEC Media Days coming up later in July. I know that we're going to have some other things put together too, and getting ready for football season, getting this jammed up for it. So that's where we're going to be moving on. That's where we're going to be focusing. In fact, that's kind of why, after bringing those things up, I wanted to say kind of the ideas, or at least what we're going to be doing on the podcast going forward, at least here in the dog days of summer. I'm going to be thinking of a lot of different stuff. I'm going to bring back a Top Tuesday. I'm going to bring back a What If Wednesday. Just, because I'll be honest about it. Content is kind of slim pickings unless there's like recruiting or anything like that. Content can be slim. So that's why I'm like, I can kind of be a little bit more creative and have a little more fun with it by being able to put out some of the other stuff too that just makes everybody kind of think, or puts up rankings, whichever. I mean, everybody loves rankings and everybody loves what if scenarios. Like, it'll be great. So I bring that up to say this, though, that if any of you have any particular thing that you want discussed on the podcast, or any particular top list or what if situations or scenarios, hit me up with them. You can follow me on all social media formats, and just let me know, because I'm always looking forward to doing different things. I have some things in mind. I have some other top rankings and all that stuff that I'm going to do, but we're going to keep it going. We're going to have some fun on the podcast, and hopefully you all continue to like and subscribe. So, but there you have it. There's that. So let's have some fun with it down the road as well. But appreciate everybody listening in to Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at BuzzJohnNabors for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.